What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Be the Number. I am Tee Off Sports. As always, I'm joined by Josephine Chang, a former D1 golfer out of the University of Kentucky, and we are here to provide you this week's DFS breakdown for the BMW Championship. But before we get to the action this week, we need to discuss something that I've been waiting 5 years to say. Tony Finau finally won again. From a personal standpoint, we both discussed him on the show last week as one of our favorite plays, and I was also able to hit him at 60 to 1 in the outright market at plus 130 for a top 30 also on that. So, Josephine, what are your thoughts on this event?
So I put together a lineup that didn't do too well. But I kind of went for a different strategy, just kind of play with it since I'm still new to it. Didn't work out, so we're going to switch that up again. But overall, I mean, Tony Finau winning, I mean, I've always loved him, loved to watch him play. And I mean, obviously everyone remembers at the Masters when he like tweaked his ankle and then finishes top 10, I think. And I think ever since then, everyone just loves him. It'd be super weird if anyone didn't love him. But overall, like I didn't get to really watch it that much. I had a really busy weekend, but I was definitely following the scores. But I mean, I think it was a great tournament just to see some players and see how the form is coming into this weekend and later on into like the championship and everything.
Yeah, Finau is a really likable guy, and I think we saw that throughout the industry. Like, not everybody had an outright ticket on him, not everybody played him on DraftKings, but I think everybody was happy for him. And I'm disappointed that you didn't play him on DraftKings because I do know both of us spoke so highly of him. And really, my thought process with it was just the price got reduced, whether that be from the outright market or for DraftKings. I thought the upside was better than the perception was around him. We had seen recently guys like Abraham Answer, Sam Burns, slew of other players win tournaments that had been perceived as being people that didn't necessarily have win equity. And I just thought Finau being in the $8,000 range, the low $8,000 range at that, and then 60 to 1 in the outright market was a really good price for him. So, at the end of the day, you're going to need some luck to win these tournaments, whether that be from betting or for just the actual player themselves. Like when I look at myself on this, I hit an outright on Tony Finau last week when he was against Max Homa at the Genesis. I had Homa in that event, and I was lucky to get that. And Finau was kind of the unlucky loser there, where Homa got stuck behind a tree and, miraculously got it up and down from that spot with it. But you kind of need things like that if you're going to find success on tour or in the betting market. So I think Finau's just kind of been a hard luck, participant in a lot of these spots to where things haven't broken his way. And I think that now that he has the win under his belt, he's going to be able to free himself up, and hopefully that results in more wins for him. But he's going to get another opportunity to do that this week at the BMW Championship. So it's Caves Valley Golf Club, 7,542 yards, par 72 bent grass greens. Top 70 qualifiers of the FedEx Cup playoffs got into the event, and there will be no cut. Now, it is worth noting that Patrick Reed is not here. He's been dealing with some health problems. We wish him the best and a quick recovery on his end with that. But this will be the first time the PGA Tour is hosting an event at the property, and we are lacking past data. But from a personal perspective of playing at Tom Fazio Designs, have you noticed any similar quirks or traits that go into those properties that you can use for an event like this?
Yeah, so obviously this is the first time that a PGA tournament is being played here. And so I kind of looked through, it was really nice. They had flyovers of all the holes that I got to look at. And so I went through it and just looking at it, it does remind me. So I've played actually quite a few Tom Fazio courses. I didn't realize, I kind of Googled it and looked at this complete list. And I was like, oh, I've played this course and this course. Some notable ones I've played at PGA National, that's in Florida. And then I played at Prim Valley, which is in Las Vegas. And then I've also played at Reynolds Lake Oconee. And the most recent one is Reynolds Lake because we played that in college. I believe it was a tournament hosted by Mercer. And I got similar vibes from that course when I was looking at the flyover, just simply because it looked like relatively narrow fairways in the sense that you miss it one side, it's a bunker, another side, it's water. So just looking at a lot of accuracy off the tee, knowing and being committed to your landing spots and where you want to hit it. It won't necessarily always be a driver off the tee, although this course is playing decently long. And so I also noticed very tricky par threes in terms of looking at it from the tee, like it kind of plays with your eyes a little bit, as well as a similar trait of very narrow greens in the sense that you really have to know your approach numbers in order to avoid a lot of the penalties around the greens, like bunkers as well. So I kind of got a good grasp of kind of what's going on, and I definitely used that to my advantage when I was looking at stats and players for this week.
Yeah, I think that's a really good breakdown that you just mentioned there. And not all Tom Fazio designs are the same, but I did notice places like Quail Hollow and Shadow Creek possess similar traits, which in turn yielded models that ventured down the same path. So, as you mentioned, deep bunkering is used for both fairways and greens, and missing to the correct quadrant will be important because of the slope and speed of this quick bent grass surface. At those two properties that I had just mentioned, when I went through and looked at them, I weighted a combination of tee to green, long iron proximity, three putt avoidance, and a little distance. And I'm going to do the same at Caves Valley this week. So I started with tee to green for 20%. I did reweight it a little bit flatter. As you mentioned, these are small greens, so I do want to round the green play with it. But it's, approach is the most important for me on that. Off the tee was the second most important, and then around the green third to get that reweighted tee to green stat that I had. I put 17.5% on bunker play and three putt avoidance. That's an even split of GIR from fairway bunkers, sand safe percentage from greenside sand traps, and three putt avoidance for these fast greens. I don't think this course will be overly complicated, but those look like the potential pitfalls to me. I have 15% on ball striking. That's a 70-30 split of distance over accuracy to get total driving, and a 70-30 split of GIR percentage over total driving to get ball striking. Now, the one thing I will say to that is you mentioned that they are on the more narrow side of the fairways, and they've made it more narrow recently on it. But the reason why I went distance over accuracy is because if you're a long hitter, I still think it's going to be the longest and the straightest hitter this week that is going to win the event. Now, not all long hitters are straight, but they're more inclined to be able to, like, at least that length is a skill set that will be able to carry over with it. And if they get hot and you get the length with it, I think that's the golfer who's going to win. Where on the contrary there, if you're a short hitter and you're accurate off the tee and you don't have the length, unless you go on the Bryson DeChambeau plan and you bulk up in a weekend here, I don't think you're going to necessarily be able to get that length. So I'm going to gear it more towards distance for that reason. I just think that the longest and the straightest player is going to be the one that wins. I have 15% on weighted proximity over 175 yards. As we've been saying, we unfortunately don't have any exact distributions of second shots, but just where the length is of the course, that seems to be the range that we're going to be fitting in, is over 175 yards, really over 200 yards if we're getting a little bit more technical with it. I did 7.5% on weighted par three. That's 50% par three average, 25% proximity over 200 yards, and 25% bogey avoidance. Three of the four stretch over 220 yards. The other is right at 200 yards. So as you mentioned, these are difficult par threes. I think you're going to have to try to avoid bogey on them. And I think anytime that you get that distance, add in the proximity to it. I have 12.5% on weighted par four. The breakdown for that is 50% par four average, 35% par fours from 450 to 500 yards, and 15% from 350 to 400. So 6 of the par fours stretch between 450 to 500, and 3 of them stretch between 350 to 400. So there are some drivable par fours. That's the other thing with Fazio designs, is he seems to have a bunch of risk reward holes that come into play with it. So I like the weighted par four there. And then I finished it up with 12.5% on par five birdie or better percentage. All 4 are long, but appear reachable for guys with distance. So I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add to that, but that's essentially where my model is this week.
No, I think I'm still definitely getting used to attributing percentages to specific stats. So I still put some arbitrary numbers in and then kind of go through and look through the stats as I go through the leaderboard. But definitely I did emphasize more distance over accuracy as well, just simply because exactly what you said, at the end of the day, this is a longer course. The holes are playing a lot longer, and so that's going to give longer hitters an advantage. Other than that, I did weigh par threes as well, simply because these seem very difficult or are on the more difficult side. And definitely, as you said, the risk reward is a attribute to Tom Fazio courses. So I actually had that written down. This is a very big risk reward. So like the long hitters, they're going to be able to take more risks, but we'll have to see if that pays off.
Yeah, and if you're making a model, I think it's like, especially if you're using my model, and you can get it every single week on Twitter at Tee Off Sports. I try to release it every single Monday with it. A lot of what I'm saying is very in depth. That's more calculated stuff that I'm doing behind the scenes with it. I also have the more simplistic view of just, off the tee or just distance or just accuracy that goes into the mix with it. So there's a bunch of different ways to play it. I'm always under the mindset that I don't love going much below 7.5% on anything that I weigh, just because I want to have some merit to the stat when I do put some weight onto it. And I typically don't go more than 25% on most things. There are weeks where, there's going to be outliers into the mix with it, but I try to build a flat model. And, that's also incorporating course history, which we have none of this week, and current form. So I like the current form stat to try to find people that are playing well. But let's move forward into the tournament this week. So we have a handful of guys above $10,000, and we are led off by Jon Rahm at 11,700. Xander Schauffele at 11,100, Jordan Spieth at 10,800, Justin Thomas at 10,600, Dustin Johnson at 10,400, Brooks Koepka at 10,200, and Colin Morikawa at 10,000. Obviously this is the elite of the elite. And even when we get down to the $9,000 range, there's more elite players in that range. A bunch of players get pushed down just with the way the pricing is and with all the studs being here this week. But when you look at this $10,000 range, what stuck out to you?
So obviously, when I first looked at it, Jon Rahm being so expensive, but it makes sense. I mean, he's playing well, finished third at the Northern Trust. Obviously, those two bogeys coming down the stretch kept him out of that playoff. But he's a strong player off the tee. He plays par threes well, and I think his game is trending in good direction. It's just, can you afford him and put together a good lineup with the price that he's at? So I think that's something you have to weigh when you're putting it together. Outside of him, I really liked Justin Thomas. So because, he finished fourth at the Northern Trust, made some late birdies down the stretch, looking really good overall, his form. And I just think that he's a solid par three player, and his approach game has been one of the best this season. And so I'm really excited to see if he can finally start to put it together here this week.
Yeah, so I'll run down all of these one by one, but let's start with Rahm at the top here. And yes, $11,700 is a lot. There's no other way to go around that. And, 21% ownership roughly is a lot. But I'm not so sure you can price him high enough right now. And I'm also not so sure that the ownership can be, in a stratosphere that I don't want to play him. So, I've been saying it for a year now that Rahm is the best player in the world. And we're finally starting to see it come together with high-end finish after high-end finish. Statistically, Rahm is in another planet. It's hard to find a reason to fade him that doesn't involve those two things I just mentioned. So I have no problems playing him in any contest. I guess the one thing with cash that I would say, if you're playing him in cash builds, it does limit what you can do beneath him. But not something, I think that the pricing is soft enough that you can fit him in anywhere and be fine with it. I'm going to skip Xander for a second because there's an interesting take I want to talk about with him. Jordan Spieth at 10,800. Unfortunately, bad Spieth returned at the Northern Trust. That was the version of him of horrible off the tee, lost 5.7 strokes there. My biggest concern, and it's not that he can't turn it around. We have a course that's really long. We have a course where long iron play is going to come into effect here. He's the lowest owned in this range if you can formulate a different viewpoint than the one I have. I'm just afraid that the off the tee stuff catches up to him again. I'm going to be off of him for that reason. Thomas at 10,600. I think I agree with you. I think he makes sense in all contests. No cut tournaments tend to reward his birdie making skills. Xander's going to be the second guy we'll touch on with that. But, the fact that we are guaranteed to get 4 rounds out of him and the birdies that he can make, I think that puts him in play. Dustin at 10,400 continues to be derailed on par fives. He's 44th in this field on par 5 birdie or better percentage over the last year. If that turns around, sure, he has a chance, but I'd rather have him at a course that is shorter at this point, which kind of sounds crazy to say because that's not what you would expect from one of the biggest hitters on tour. Koepka at 10,200. Little off with the irons the last few weeks. I technically have him as a slight negative value across the board, but I'm not going to necessarily talk anybody out of him. Just not necessarily the first name I'm going to click. And then the real wild card in this mix is Morikawa at 10,000. So Morikawa said after this tournament that he's been dealing with some back problems after the Olympics. And I think it's just going to come down to the price makes sense. The ownership makes sense. I'm going to try to figure out where he's at as this week goes on. And obviously we're recording this on a Tuesday. We've gotten a later start to this week. Time is running out. So, on Wednesday, we're going to have to make a decision, or a Thursday morning at the latest on it. But as of right now, I am okay with the mentality of playing Morikawa, because I do think that his iron skill set is so much better than anybody else in the world when he's on. I just think that we need to figure out where the back's at. So that's something we're going to have to look at in media and all that goes on. But Xander at 11,100. So I think this price tag is incorporating the no-cut narrative that follows Xander around. But I don't necessarily hate that if that means we get a version of him that is around 10% owned. The course seems ideally suited for his total driving and birdie making acumen. And I tend to think that this is one of the better leverage plays we can find in this zone here. So I am going to play Xander. I think, yes, on the surface, the price is a little bit much here, but I think this is one of the better courses that you can find for him. Like, anytime you have total driving, I've always said Rahm and Xander are the two guys that you kind of want to pinpoint. And if he was $10,000, he'd probably be 25% owned. So from a no-cut narrative, with him being over 11,000, if I can get him at under 10% or around 10%, I kind of really like going down that route. So I'll probably, if I'm playing cash, I think Thomas and Rahm are fine. GPPs, Xander, Thomas, Rahm, and I'm going to monitor Morikawa, but that's more of where I'm at this week with it. But let's drop down into the $9,000 range, and we are led off by the man himself, Tony Finau, at 9,800. We have Louis Oosthuizen at 9,600, Cameron Smith at 9,500, Rory McIlroy at 9,400, Bryson DeChambeau at 9,300, Patrick Cantlay at 9,200, Victor Hovland at 9,100, and Berger rounds out the range at $9,000. So in this section here, any fades that you did not like? And then after you answer that question, any players that you do like in this range?
Oh, okay. I had trouble distinguishing actually in this range because I had just a lot of good things to say. I struggled a little bit with Louis Oosthuizen because if I remember correctly, he didn't play last week due to some injury. I can't remember what it was. And so for him to come back, this week, I mean, having rested, not really knowing where that injury is at on a long course, I'm a little scared, a little iffy. I mean, his game was trending in an okay-ish place. I just am not too sure what he's going to be like coming back from something like a back injury. So him at 9,600, I was a little iffy. And then I can't remember. Oh, I said having Bryson at 9,300. Obviously, he's the longest hitter. He can really take advantage of this course just with how far he hits it. The downside is that I feel like people are maybe thinking the same thing. He's only 9,300. He's a long hitter. He can maybe take advantage of this course. So his ownership is already really high. So I really didn't like Louis and Bryson for those reasons. Who I did like. So going into this tournament, just with this field, obviously these players, they're playing really good golf to get here. And so I focused a lot on just how they looked coming in, where their form is at currently. So obviously Tony Finau just winning, that confidence boost and just the player that he is. I like him. I looked at Rory. I had him in my lineup last week. He let me down a little bit, but he did technically still put together 4 decent rounds. I think he can take advantage of his distance this week and set himself up for more aggressive approach shots. So I liked him here. And then also Patrick Cantlay and Victor Hovland. So with Cantlay, he has fantastic green regulation percentages. He's not the longest hitter, but he did finish, I believe, 11th last week. And so it just goes to show that he can definitely take advantage of birdie chances. And then with Hovland, my model really likes him. He's in the top 10. And I like where his game is at. I just really didn't like how he let his emotions get the best of him last week. And so, I mean, he put together great rounds until the fourth round. But I don't know. Maybe he's going to come in and try to redeem himself, but I I don't know if you have anything to say to that.
Yeah, I do. And I think we're more or less on the same page here with a lot of the things that you mentioned. And the one thing I want to point out is I am fine starting in the $9,000 range. I do think Rom makes a lot of sense up top. I think Xander makes sense from a contrarian standpoint. I think Morikawa, if the back's fine, and Thomas, I think all those are fine places, but I think you can also start in the $9,000 range because we've had so many guys push down. So I'll answer this question in the same way that you did with starting with the fades here. So my biggest fade of the week is Louis at 9,600. It just feels like Oosthuizen is a withdraw candidate because of the back. 15% ownership isn't exactly where I want to be for someone that realistically could leave the event before Sunday. And we have seen him do this so many times in the past. Like, if his bed doesn't show up, if his back is wrong, if something is not going right, he pulls out of these tournaments, and that's a death sentence for this week. If in a no-cut tournament, you get, a round or two out of him and he's out of there all of a sudden. So I think Louis is I don't want to say a bad play because he can turn it around and his game was trending in the right direction beforehand. But I just think there's too much risk involved in him. Like if I'm going to play him, even though he doesn't necessarily win tournaments, I'd rather just bet him as an outright because at least that way, if he pulls out, you lose a ticket, you don't lose all your DraftKings lineups with it. So that's my thought on Louis. And I'm not going to have an outright ticket on him. So for me, he's kind of just a stay away at this point. Then the other two that I think do make better outright wagers than they do DraftKings plays would be Rory at 9,400 and Bryson at 9,300. And I'm going to clump them together for the sake of this, but both will be around 20% owned. DeChambeau has lost 2.2 shots per event with his short game in his last 6 trackable events. Rory, on the other hand, has upside of his own, but 20% is a lot in my mind for someone priced in the top 10 on the board. I'm not saying that he can't get a top 10 finish, but really a victory is the only thing that would derail us this week and like really make the fade bad with it. So look, at 28-1, I don't really mind playing Rory in that direction with it, but I'm kind of out at 20 and 23% ownership on those. But some guys I do like in this range, I love Tony Finau again at $9,800. I'm going to be going back down that well with him. And it's kind of ironic because the one thing I keep hearing everybody mention is Tony Finau just won a tournament, so he can't win again. Well, we went 5 years saying Tony Finau couldn't win a tournament. So if that's the deterrent we're going to come up with this week, I think Finau's in a perfect spot. Off the tee around the green. We mentioned that on the show last week for a reason of why he was a good play. I think the $9,800 price tag in reality actually bumps down his ownership percentage. I think that's a good thing to have happen for him. I think if you had him at, $8,900, more people are going to play him. And I'd rather be able to carry some leverage and ownership here. And if he doesn't win this week, I think he can compete at the Tour Championship. So he's somebody I'm going to keep on my radar. I kind of like Cameron Smith a little bit at 9,500, and I'm not typically a guy that backs him, but there's a lot to like from a statistical perspective. He ranks second in putting, fourth in my weighted par 3 category. He's number 1 in overall birdie or better and first in bunker play. As you mentioned, Patrick Cantlay at 9,200. The irons never really got going for him at the Northern Trust, but he averaged 3.62 on approach over his last 5 if we remove his performance at Liberty National. Cantlay has gained off the tee in 22 of his last 25. Bent is his best surface, and he has gained around the green of 17 of 19. My favorite outright bet this week is Victor Hovland at 9,100. I like him and everything also. And it's funny that you said, he let the emotions get the best of him because he really did. But Hovland's usually a happy-go-lucky guy with it. So I don't know what happened. He destroyed his putter. He made a mess of Sunday. But because he did that, we now have a $9,100 price tag, and he's 35-1 in the betting market. I think if he doesn't do that, we might have a 25-1 golfer and a guy that's in the high 9,000s. Like if we look at Cameron Smith at 9,500, imagine if those two guys flip-flop their performances. Like I'd kind of imagine that Hovland would be in the really high 9,000s. Like he'd be higher than 9,500. He'd probably be higher than Louis at 9,600. So I think it's a good buyback spot for him. And then I like Berger at 9,000. He's one of only 3 players that graded inside the top 20 for me of all stats I measured. The other 2 were Morikawa and Rahm. He lost 5.7 shots with his putter last week, but he gained 5.8 with his irons. I think that that's just kind of more of an aberrational result than anything else. I think that the putter is fine. I think he'll be okay with that. I think that the irons, if they remain good, this should be a good course for him. And I mean, I guess to me, Berger, Hovland, Cantlay, Finau would be my favorite. I'm going to fit Cameron Smith into it. And then if I can just backtrack for 1 second, because there was something I wanted to say about Xander that I forgot. So one of the things I remembered about Xander, and I tweeted this out about a year and a half ago when I was researching him. He's one of the best GIR players in the world. But the thing is when you get really long greens with him, like really lengthy greens, whether they're, wide or a lot of depth to them or whatever the problem is, he seems to play it safe and goes to the middle of the green on it. So a lot of times in those events, he doesn't do as well. With these being shorter greens and smaller greens, I think that it actually benefits him in the GIR percentage. And I've seen that across the board. So that's one of the reasons, if I'm backtracking, why I do like Xander. I think the GIR percentage mixed with these being smaller will actually help him. And he'll be naturally have to be a little bit more aggressive to get himself in a position. But to me, that's where I'm at. But let's move into the $8,000 range. And I guess I will start off this range. So there's 5 guys for me that showed as a positive value. Scotty Scheffler at 8,900 was a very small positive value. If we're going down the Finau route, it's another guy that should be picking up a win at some point. I wish he was a little bit lower than 8,900. I wish he was a little higher in outright price than 33 to 1. Not going to bet him in the outright market because of that, but I do think he's playable at 8,900. And then to me, I'm just going to go down the board with it and kind of go to the bottom here. Really like Sam Burns at 8,300. His game continues to be hot with 3 top 21s in a row. He's 14th tee to green over his last 24 rounds. Top 10 in weighted par 4 scoring, par 5 birdie or better, and overall birdie or better. And he's 6th in 3-putt percentage. Paul Casey at 8,200. I think Casey's one of the best buyback spots this week after coming 64th at the Northern Trust. He gained 8.9 shots off the tee and approach over 4 days there, but imploded with his short game by losing 10.1 around the green and putting. This is more of the salary point where I want to be with Casey. This is more of the range where I think he pays off nicer. I think it was 89 or 8,800 last week. Little bit higher than I normally like to be with him. I like him in this low 8,000, the high $7,000 range. So I think Casey is a really good spot to bounce back here. I'm going to play a little bit of Joaquin Niemann at 8,100. I think Niemann's been trending a little bit in the wrong direction, but distance he has off the tee and the scoring ability from all 3 par ranges makes him a nice flyer at under 10%. And one of my favorite plays, which we just keep doing this every single week. Sung Jae Im, $8,000. I see no reason to jump off of Sung Jae after he dominated off the tee and approach again at Liberty National. He's been 2.8 shots off the tee over his last 3 on average, 2.9 with his irons. I think if he gets any semblance of a short game, he has a chance to compete and potentially win the tournament this week. I think at $8,000, there's a ton of upside to be had there. I don't have an outright ticket on him. I am going to play him as a top 20, though. If you look at some of those legal sports books there, I believe there's a plus 160 on a top 20 on him there. So that's where I'm at. But Josephine, what do you like in this range?
No, yeah, you basically hit the same people I was going to talk about, but I'm going to start with Sung Jae since we're just already here. I mean, I've been playing him in all my lineups. I love where his game is trending. We keep talking about him. He's putting up solid scores. I mean, if anything, maybe he's not as long as any of the other players in this field, barely, but that's really the only thing that might be like off about him for this week. I love him. I'm going to end up playing him. And then Paul Casey, on top of everything that you said, he also plays par 3 as well. So I really liked him here as well at 8,200. Sam Burns, in my one note, I just said he makes birdies. So I just, that right there was enough for me back. He's at 8,300. I really like him. I was looking at Scotty Scheffler as well. I don't know too much about him, but I mean, I was looking at his stats and everything. I was a little concerned that he wasn't such a long hitter and his like average approach proximities weren't super close for those longer distances. And so that might be hindering his chances at making birdies. But of course, we talked about how this course, the greens are smaller, so that could be mitigated. And then, I don't know, I'm always looking at Hideki. We know he's solved with his irons, but I'm wondering if maybe like his driving distance will probably put him at a disadvantage on this course. And I can't remember how he played last week, but I don't think he played well, did he?
He came in 43rd.
Yeah. So I don't know. He has a spot in my heart, as I've said in like all of the other episodes, but I don't know if I would. I don't know. He's at 8,800 and he's not playing the most solid golf right now. So not sure how I feel about him, but definitely on the Sam Burns, Paul Casey, Sung Jae Im train.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Hideki is I'd rather him just be a little bit cheaper also.
Yeah.
I think that that would make him more playable, but in the same breath with that, he's almost 16% projected owned right now. So how much cheaper can you make him? I mean, that ownership to me is going to have me off of him. I'm not going to play Hideki this week. Because of ownership, because of my overall rank. I mean, there's a lot of things that are kind of pointing in the wrong direction for him. For Scheffler, he's such a great total driver that I think that for a course like this, that's going to matter. And if we look at Sungjae, like, sure, you can make the argument that his distance, he's 49th in my 2-year model in this field. He's 4th in driving accuracy, though. So if you weigh it a little bit more towards the driving accuracy, maybe a little bit less towards distance, and that's not even saying that you make it like geared towards accuracy. Even if you made it like 50-50 or something, which I think is a reasonable thing to do, obviously Sungjae is going to jump up on any model if you do that. So I think Sungjae makes a lot of sense here. I think Sungjae is one of probably the better plays if you're looking in this low range of somebody who actually has upside to win. And the thing you said about Burns that I think is the most important is anytime you have a no-cut tournament, birdies, birdies, birdies. Mostly for DraftKings scoring. Birdies mean so much having 4 days. So I think Burns makes a ton of birdies. I think he makes a whole lot of sense at his price tag with where he's at. So yeah, there's 5 guys to me, the 5 guys I mentioned. Scheffler at some point's going to get a win, I would think, but whether it comes here is another thing. But I really like this low $8,000 range. But let's move it down now into the $7,000 range. And let's start with Shane Lowry at 7,900 and let's play it down to 7,500. So we have a little bit more of a condensed region here. And I will give a couple and start this range off. So I think Lowry makes some sense at 7,900. I think the game is just trending in such a good direction for him right now. 11th at the Northern Trust, 23rd at the WGC, 12th at the Open. My only concern is his off the tee stuff. But with that being said, 43rd over a 2-year sample size, 53rd over the last 24 rounds. So he's doing it off the tee in almost the same fashion that you can always expect with him. I think that makes it fine. I think, he's one of my better cash plays that I have just because of those results. Kokrak's kind of the wild card here. Form has just been awful recently. 2 missed cuts back to back. 34th at the WGC, 26th at the Open. He does have the 12th at the Rocket Mortgage. I think at a no-cut tournament, I am kind of willing to give him a chance if the ownership goes down low enough. But right now we're looking at 11%. So it's not the lowest. It's not the highest with it. It's just kind of right where it needs to be to make it kind of make sense with it. But being led by the putter, that's something that you never want to see with a game. I really like Keegan Bradley at $7,700. I think he's one of the best ball strikers in the world. Sure, I always worry about the putter a little bit, but I think Keegan makes sense. Sergio at $7,600 is another guy that I like. I think the ball striking makes sense with him. I think if he gets any sort of a putter going for him, he can compete in this tournament. And I mean, I guess that's about it for me. I'm okay playing Cameron Tringali. The off the tee stuff worries me a little bit with him, but he's been so spectacular recently, just over and over again. 21st last week, 16th at the 3M, 26th at the Open, a 14th at the Rocket Mortgage. So the results keep turning in for him week after week with it. But I mean, Henley, maybe you can make an argument for. I could worry a little bit that the distance isn't there. But what do you like?
Yeah, so I again highlighted about the same people. I really like Sergio here. I know that he didn't play well last week, but I feel like this course just sets up well for his. He's decently long off the tee, hits in regulation, he makes birdies on par fives. And so, I mean, like you said, his putting is what's been getting him, but I think the course itself just sets up well for his game. Keegan Bradley, actually, I'm glad that you brought him up and talked about him because my model does like him. He is in the top 20 based on how I did my model. And then I was looking at it, played well at the Northern Trust. And so when I got down into the 7,000, 6,000 range, just with the fact that I'm not great at doing percentages for stats and stuff, I started to look more at just recent form and how they've been playing and everything. And so looking at how he played at the Northern Trust, I was like, okay, that makes sense. His game is trending in a good direction. So, I mean, I have him highlighted here at 7,700. I was like, well, he seems like he's doing good. For Russell Henley, I wrote that for some concerns. He just missed the cut last week and he doesn't seem to take advantage of par fives as well as I would want him to. But I believe last week his putting is what really got him into trouble. And so overall, he's still hitting the ball well. And so I think if he can figure out the putting, like maybe on these smaller greens, that might be mitigated. So that was someone I was thinking about. For Jason Kokrak, I said he's long off the tee, takes advantage of par fives. I'm just not a big fan of his like par four scoring overall. But other than that, I didn't have anything bad to say.
Yeah, I mean, Kokrak is trending in the wrong direction. That's the problem. He's 25th for me overall, 18th from an upside perspective. So that's more of a GPP play. Henley's a very slight negative value for me. And I agree about the par five scoring. He's 64th overall. That's the big deterrent there. You have 4 of them at this course. I'm not going to necessarily get to him. Like, I would rather drop down the Keegan. I would rather drop down the Sergio if I'm going to get in that range, because Keegan for me, 21st overall, 12th for upside. Sergio, 20th overall, 16th for upside. Those are 2 of the bigger differentials I have in this $7,000 range in general. Cameron Tringali has some value with him. As I said, off the tee distance matters a little bit, and I think that worries me some with him. But that's it for me in that range. But let's drop down to $7,400 down to the $7,000, and I'll kick it to you here. What do you like?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, I started to look in this range more at just how they've been finishing, and so I kind of highlighted people that finish well at the Northern Trust, and then I kind of went over and looked more at their proximities, their iron play, green regulation, and kind of tried to figure out who seemed to like look okay based on just my knowledge of playing golf. Like when it comes to proximities for our team, it's actually funny, you might like this. So we used an app, I can't remember what it's called, but we had to track all of our stats. And so 8 feet and in, we actually called them blackjacks. And so those are like the best. You wanted from wherever you're hitting into the green, we wanted blackjacks. And then 21 feet and in, we called them in position. So those 21 feet and in, like you've got a good chance at making a putt, giving yourself a good look at birdie. And so I was kind of using those 2 distances to look at their proximities. And so based on that, just down in this range, you've got Harold Varner III, just because he played well last week. He has decent driving distance, and looking at those proximities, they looked okay. And then I had Vegas on here. I had highlighted him based on driving distance. His accuracy isn't the best, but as we said, like when you're longer off the tee, sometimes accuracy suffers a little bit. And then at 7,000, actually, I actually really like Charlie Hoffman. So I said he's definitely long enough to contend here. His game isn't as accurate as I would like it to be, but he's definitely trending in a really good direction, and he's only 7,000. I mean, obviously ownership percentage at almost 15% might be a little bit of a deterrent. But that's kind of who I had in this range. I struggled really to find anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there are some names here. I don't think that you have like a slew of people necessarily. Let's start with Harold Varner. So the other show that I do is the Better Golf Pod, and I do that with stick picks. Nick is a brilliant mind. Give him a follow on Twitter, and he's more than just golf. I mean, he has a football model. He has a baseball model. He's in football season right now with everything he's producing. So a lot of free content that's out there. He does great work for Win Daily. One of my good friends in this industry, and somebody that I always enjoy doing the show with every single week. But he came up with an interesting thing about Varner, that at these courses where you have to hit driver off the tee, for whatever reason, he's just a little bit worse than you would expect him to be with the distance that he has. So, he's 30th in driving distance, 38th in driving accuracy. He's 28 for me in total driving. I think the numbers kind of make sense across the board, but that always resonates in my mind when we talk about Varner, is when we get these 7,400 and 7,500 yard courses, that he seems to go in the wrong direction. So that would be my only problem with him there, because I mean, Nick has been right almost every single time with him on that. If we drop a little bit lower to Kevin Streelman and kind of just doubling down on stick picks here, Kevin Streelman's one of his favorite plays of the week. I just got done finishing the podcast with him, and Streelman makes a lot of sense. Like if we look at his metrics, not the longest guy off the tee, but there's a lot to like. So 28th in my weighted tee to green, 21st over his last 24 rounds. He is 35th in my 2-year model off the tee. He's 18th in approach, 26th over the last 24 rounds there. He's 10th in around the green over his last 24 rounds, and inside the top 50 in weighted par 3, par 4. The par 5s leave a little bit something to be desired, but at $7,200, at least there's like a skill set there that we can start seeing form. So I don't have a problem with Strillman at that price tag. You mentioned Vegas. I think he's just one of the better ball strikers. I think he's great off the tee. I'm willing to ignore his performance last week of missing the cut at the Northern Trust. I think that that's more of an outlier than anything. And then for me, I also like Charlie Hoffman, and I have a little bit of Maverick McNeely also at 7,000. I just think McNeely's form looks really good. 27th, 18th, 16th, 18th, 21st, 30th. I mean, that's just dating back from last week to the Traveler. So that's I believe an 8-week span there that he has a bunch of top 30 finishes. So that's something worth looking at. I mean, in a no cut, we need to make birdies, but if you give me a top 30 finish at $7,000, I don't have a problem there. And Hoffman, 10th in strokes gained approach. That is over a 2-year sample size and over the last 24 rounds. 7th in weighted par 3, 9th in just par 3 average in general. Nothing wrong with the par 4 numbers. I mean, as you said, like the par 5 maybe leaves a little something to be desired, but I think at this range, you're kind of just trying to find a skill set that can be extrapolated out, and you hope that like things turn around in other parts of the game. For that reason, Cameron Champ potentially at $7,300. We know other than Bryson, he's like the second longest player on tour. So maybe a guy like Champ can get hot there. That game of his has been turning around also lately. 27th at the Northern Trust, 31st at the WGC, the win at the 3M Open, the 11th at the John Deere. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at down in this range. I'm going to try to find skill sets. Like Champ has the distance. Strillman has been pretty good across the board with everything. Hoffman has some strengths of his game that I can find. But let's wrap this up in the $6,000 range. And I definitely don't have as many plays as I do on a normal week with this, but I do think there are shots to take. But let's start with you. What do you like down in this section?
Yeah, so coming down to the $6,000 range, I always struggle. I feel like a lot of the time you're able to be like, well, I've got some people. This time around, I did kind of highlight going off of how they finished kind of at the Northern Trust and then backtracking through their stats just to see if anything popped out. So just I had highlighted Sebastian Munoz just with good finishes at the Northern Trust and the Wyndham, so game trending in a good direction. I have Carlos Ortiz, so he didn't play the best at the Northern Trust, but I kind of went back and looked at his stats. He's long off the tee. He doesn't seem to hit a ton of greens, but he does take advantage of par fives, which is beneficial here. I also highlighted, actually, this is someone I wanted to ask you about, which is Harry Higgs, just because he played well at the Northern Trust and the Wyndham, but my model didn't like him too well. So that was someone I kind of want to throw your way. But before I let you get there, there are two other people that in this range I kind of liked, or actually my model seems to always like, and that person is Taylor Gooch. So he's consistently been kind of in this lower price range, and my model has always picked up on him. And I feel like you talked about him last week a little bit. So I had him there, and then Hudson Swafford is the last one that I have on here. And I just said he's long enough off the tee, but I was very concerned about just his par 3 averages and just his short game in general around the green, considering that if your approach numbers aren't good here, they're such narrow greens, you're going to have good short game. But those were some of the names I had down here. What have you got?
Well, let's start with what you have here. So Swafford's an interesting one. I mean, that's bare minimum $6,000. And if we just look at what he's done recently, would be comparing my model versus his last 24 rounds. Over the last 24 rounds, he's 9 spots better strokes gained total. He's 9 spots better tee to green. He's 30th spots better off the tee. He's 5 spots better approach. And he is 6 spots better around the green, 12 spots better putting. So across the board, it's a guy who's trending in the right direction. So I think at the bare minimum price tag of $6,000, I think it makes a lot of sense. He's going to be about 8% owned. I think that's kind of just him trending in the right direction and people noticing that with him. I don't have a problem with that. Harry Higgs technically was a positive value for me. I mean, the thing with Higgs is he's very hit and miss, but I guess it's kind of what you're looking for. Like, give me a guy that at least has the ability to give you a performance. Like, he has 2 top 16s in a row if we're looking at that. There are some red flags, and that's obviously why he's in this range. And but 33rd in overall birdie or better percentage, like if we're comparing that to the guys in his range, that is the best number. Patton Kizzire is better at 6,200. He's 16th in that number. Aaron Wise is 28th. Max Homa's 40th. Ryan Palmer's 23rd. But like other than those guys, that's pretty much the best overall birdie or better percentage number you're going to find. So at least Higgs has some upside there. And I want to touch back to what you said with Ortiz. So I seem to like Ortiz every single week also. Good par 5 scorer. I've always thought he's a very good around the green player, and that's something that's been trending in the wrong direction for him recently. But I just think his ability to score on long par 4s, his ability to score on par 5s, his 3-putt percentage is really good. I think he's playable. I think Max Homa's playable at $6,400. We saw him win at a course that I used as a comp here when he won at the Genesis. So I think that, his ability to be good off the tee, his ability to be good in some of these metrics that I'm looking at makes sense. When I was just talking about birdie or better percentage, Ryan Palmer, Patton Kizzire, I think those are 2 guys that can give you upside down in this range. We've seen Palmer have some finishes, not so much recently, but earlier in the year, where there's certain courses where he comes to play at. I think at $6,400, he's a good total driver of the ball. Good par 5 scorer. I always worry a little bit about what he brings to the table out of these bunkers. We've seen some big numbers from him in the past. Patton Kizzire is another guy at 6,200. At least he has the birdie making skills. He can get hot. I think he has potential to be first round leader down in this range. If you're getting real fancy with bets that you're trying to make here, that's over 100 to 1 that you can find him at. So I think that, his potential skill set makes him somebody worth looking at. And then maybe just Aaron Wise. Like the thing with Wise that I have a problem with, if we look at the ball striking, he's 3rd. That's by being 4th in GIR percentage. His short irons are better than his long irons, so that's part of the problem there if we're looking at it. But really the thing that brings him down is just the putter. And I said this last week, and maybe if the putter remains good, he's changed the putter. He's now using one of those Adam Scott broomsticks out there. So maybe that turns his game around. Maybe that's something that helps him. But at $6,300, he at least has upside. We know he can make birdies in bunches. And at $6,300, like, in the $6,000 range in general, find me guys like Palmer, Kizzire, Wise, maybe to a lesser extent, a guy like Harry Higgs, but guys that at least can get hot with it. But that's pretty much where I'm at. Like Swafford's the only one in the $6,000 range that I'm going to consider playing. I think in the $6,200 range, you have guys like Higgs, Gooch, Kizzire, Wise, moving on up. As I said, Homa, Palmer. Mitchell's in good form. I'm not going to get there at 10% ownership. I just think that there's too many red flags at 10% that I don't want to get behind that. Emiliano Grillo at 6,500. I don't mind him necessarily. Ortiz, as we both mentioned. And then the last one I guess I will throw out, and this is about as much of a dart throw as you can get, even though the price tag doesn't necessarily allude to it being such. Mark Leishman at 6,700. There is so much not to like about his stats, but there's also so much to like about his stats if you condense it down a little bit. So let me give you the good rather than the bad, because there's a reason why he's down in the $6,000 range. And maybe more so than a lot of these guys, he has the potential to be dead last in different course, different type of a setup last year at Olympia Fields for the BMW Championship. It played really difficult. I forget exactly what he scored. He was like 30, 40, 50 over par for that tournament. So when things go wrong, they can go very wrong. But I want to give the positives for why I think he makes some sense. He's 2nd in my weighted proximity from over 175 yards. He is pretty good with some of the stuff really close in too. If he has to, try to, whether that be safe par, if he goes, off the tee into a problem, or even on the par 5s, if he lays up into that like 100 and in zone with it. Ball striking is going to be where part of the problem is, but 4th in my model in bunker play plus 3-putt percentage. He is 12th in GIR fairway, GIR percentage from fairway bunkers. I think that's something to where if you want to make the argument that he's a little sloppy off the tee, sure. But if he's able to then salvage par from those situations better than most players, I think that makes some sense, and he's 6th in sand save percentage in general. So Leishman's more of a dart throw. At 3%, I'm kind of willing to make it, but if he comes and finishes dead last place, like, I'm not going to be shocked on that.
It's really funny actually that just the whole way you just described Leishman, it just reminds me of one of my teammates. Phenomenal player, absolutely amazing. But off the tee, she just hit this banana slice, and it was hilarious because our coach would always be like, all right, we got to hit fairway, set us up to hit into the green. And she would just slice the ball like crazy. And then more oftentimes than not, she always had the best green and regulation percentages of the team. And so we were always just like, well, it's not pretty, but she gets it done. So it's just really funny when you were going through your whole spiel of Leishman. I was like, that sounds like my teammate.
Yeah, it's interesting players that play like that, because I mean, like, there's just some things that they're really elite at, and sometimes it pays off, and sometimes when the game gets sloppy in other directions, that's when we run into problems, and Leishman's 30 over par. But I guess before we get out of here, any thoughts on Brandon Grace at 6,800?
Brandon Grace. No, I did not really look at him, but just going through the stats really quick, I mean, it doesn't seem like he takes advantage of par fives and makes a lot of birdies, but I can see like short game wise, he's pretty solid, and proximities, he's actually decently solid as well over, I was in the 175, 200 range. And so my model puts him at like 50th. So he's not all the way at the bottom, but he is in that $6,000 range. So I don't expect too much. I mean, I don't see too much of a reason to play him, but also nothing that'll like be absolutely horrendous.
Well, I guess I'll give you the reason for why he makes sense. And by the way, he's 60th in my model, so he doesn't grade well for me either. But I feel I would be remiss not to mention him just because of the form. This is the best version of him that we've gotten in like his career, probably. So if we just look at what he's done recently, 7th at the US Open, he missed the cut at the Open, 30th at the WGC, 2nd at the Wyndham, missed cut at the Northern Trust. So yes, there are scattered performances in there, but at least we have seen a 2nd at the Wyndham. We've seen a 7th at the US Open. The numbers are all trending in the right direction. He's 33 spots higher in his last 24 rounds, strokes gained total, 25 spots higher tee to green, 22 spots higher approach, 26 spots higher putting, which is not necessarily a stat I love using when we're looking at putting, kind of helping players out with it. But look, I mean, I know he's going to be more popular than a lot of players in this range. I just figured it was interesting mentioning him. And then the last person that I want absolutely no part of, and ironically, he is dead last in my model, which will be unfortunate for some people that love him, but that's Phil Mickelson at 6,300. Do you have any thoughts on him?
My model put him at 68th, so almost same. No, I mean, I didn't like him. I just feel like just throughout his career, he's always known as kind of like the short game god and like just these crazy shots around the greens. But I think just with where his game is and his just swing and everything, it's not where you want it to be for a course like this. So I don't want anything to do with him as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at. I see he's at about 2.5% ownership. Like I can't get there. And as you said, this is a course that I think you're going to have to hit fairways, and he's wild. He's missing them at an extreme percentage when he goes off. Like, he's 67th in GIR percentage for me. He's 68 of 69 players in driving accuracy. And, he doesn't hit bombs in the way that I think he believes he's hitting these hellacious seeds out there. So it's just one of those things where, yeah, I mean, the distance, if he turns it around, if he goes PGA Championship level with it, who knows? But I think there's big numbers out there for him, and just wanted to throw him out there because it's a big name. He's a guy that nobody's really touching on this week, and he's dead last for me. I just thought that was an interesting thing to throw out there. But let's wrap this up. That's it from me on this end. I mean, Josephine, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, so as always, you can find me at jchang1020 on Twitter, on Instagram, and then you can find Spencer and I together at Be the Better Pod. Trying to do a little bit better about voting on Instagram. I know that kind of fell to me, and I've kind of let that die a little bit. So I will do better this week, but give us a follow there, and that'd be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, it would really help if you could follow us on both Twitter and Instagram at Be the Number Pod. We're trying to grow our exposure on both those platforms. We just opened the Instagram a couple weeks ago, and the Twitter's been doing well. We're getting good support with it. So, thank you everybody for tuning in. The episodes are getting a lot of views, and we've gotten really good feedback from everybody. So, if you have any questions, be sure to hit Josephine up at Jane Chang 1020. You can hit me up at Tee Off Sports. That's also on Instagram now too. I created an Instagram account with Tee Off Sports, so you can contact me there. As I said, you can find us at Be the Number Pod. But good luck this week to everybody. We'll try to keep the momentum going, and we'll continue to try to hit winners. So thank you for tuning in. Good luck this week, and let's make some money.